There we go. So, before he was born, an angel came to Samson's mother and says, you're going to have a son. This son is going to be a deliverer of Israel. At the very beginning of this, we saw how Israel had several deliverers. To be precise, 11 before Samson. They had all come and gone. The children of Israel had rebelled against God. Then God brought in another nation to put them into captivity. Then they cried out for a deliverer. God gave them a deliverer. Then as soon as that deliverer had passed away, they fell back into sin and doing what's against God's laws. Then God sent them another deliverer after they repented. And this was the process by which it happened. Until we come to the life of Samson, the people had rebelled against God, had cried out to God, and God was going to send them a deliverer. This deliverer was going to be unique. Samson, because Samson's mother was told, this man is to be a Nazarite, a man of God, a man before God. And a Nazarite has to hold on to three things throughout his life. He's not allowed to drink any wine. So strict is the rule that he's not even allowed to touch a grape. It's a shame, I really like grapes, I'd hate to take that vow. Second of which, he's not allowed to touch anything which is dead, be that a fly, a human, doesn't matter, he's not allowed to touch it. It's to break his vow if he was to do so. And thirdly, he wasn't allowed to cut his hair. And that was to be an outward appearance so that people could see that Samson was God's man. That he was God's man. And Samson, as you will see later on as I read the passage, chapter 16, Samson had taken this, obviously would have had very long hair. Many people believe he was, in the passage we were about to read, he was in his mid-40s. He'd never cut his hair. You can imagine just the length of his hair. And he had braided it into 7 locks, as the Bible calls it. So Samson had kept these Nazarite vows for his whole life until he got to the age of 20, went down to the land of the Philistines, not told to do so by God, but wandered down there and saw a woman. And in that woman he saw a potential wife. Now the only issue really was that God had expressly commanded that all Israelites were to marry within their nation. Israelite was to marry Israelite, and they were not to go abroad and to try and take other daughters from other nations. But Samson had other ideas. And Samson knew the calling on his life. It tells us in the last verse of chapter 13, the Spirit of the Lord was stirring in Samson. Samson had this relationship with God, a godly relationship, like our nation has had in times past. We have seen incredible things. Our history is full of God moving in extraordinary ways. Think of, I'll not forget that Remembrance Day Sunday that we had just last year. And my dad explained what the Lord had done for us in World War II. And how the Battle of Britain. And how Winston Churchill, that great leader, that great military leader, said, let's have a day of prayer and fasting. And many people to this day still believe that because of that great day of prayer and fasting, the great unity that was shown by the nation, they overcame the Germans despite the great odds that were against them. And we remain free here today and not speaking German. Thank you very much. So, Samson saw this woman, lusted after her in her heart, went back to his parents, explained the situation. They were devastated at this news because they thought, you're meant to be the deliverer of Israel. You can't do this. But Samson had determined in his heart, I'm taking her. And so he did. He went down, the wedding feast was prepared, the wedding went on. 7 days, as it was the culture, was going to be the feast. And because it was the land of the Philistines, no doubt there would have been drink and lots of grapes and all the rest of it. There he would have broken one of his vows. He wasn't allowed to drink. And then obviously, as many of us know, he got to a point in his wedding feast where he said to some of the companions that were around him, I've got a riddle for you. Out of the eater came something to eat. Out of the strong came something sweet. And he put this riddle to them and says, by the end of the feast, if you cannot tell me the answer, you will give me 30 changes of clothes which are linen, which was a very expensive clothing of those days. So these men, these 30 companions, conspired to one another. They could not figure out what the answer was, so they got a hold of Samson's Philistine wife and says, you tell us the riddle, you get the riddle out of him, you seduce him, you do whatever you need to do, you just make sure we get this riddle. So she does so. She goes and she does what women do best and pestered poor Samson to the point where he just was nearly pulling out his hair. Didn't quite, but nearly did. And he eventually broke down and says, okay, the answer is this. The minute she got the answer, she went straight to her Philistine compatriots and explained the riddle. And these guys were cunning. They waited to the last minute. On the last day, the evening of the last day, just when Samson thought, I've got it, I've got these 30 changes of clothes, I'm rich, I've got the woman I want, life is good, behind me is the days of God, the days of being a deliverer, no longer have I got that pressure on my shoulders, I'm free. Until they said, we've got the answer. And he gave it to him, and at that moment he realised they had betrayed him. That his wife, his dear wife, the one whom he desired so much, had betrayed him. He stormed off in a rage, got his portion of the riddle, he got their payment and threw it at them. He walked back to Israel in a bit of a strop, and his wife, while he was away, decided, you know what, I take a fancy to the best man, and ran off with the best man. A couple of days later, Samson comes back to claim his wife, to try and make an end of all the arguments that had happened. Got there only to discover what I just said. The best man had his wife. So he went a bit of a rage. And this is where we were last week. He went down and he grabbed 300 foxes, tied torches to these 300 foxes' tails, set them in fire and let them go into the standing grain of the Philistines, set them into the barns of the Philistines, put them into the olive orchards of the Philistines, and utterly bankrupt that nation, or the people it affected. They were totally in disarray. They could not believe the amount that they had lost. So they thought, let's get our own back. Let's get our own back. So they went up to Samson thinking they could take him on, only to find out that Samson was a bit more than they could handle. They went down to see Samson. They got his people. His people then took Samson, bound him up, and hoped that they could hand him over and the Philistines would be appeased and they wouldn't come up and destroy the rest of the Israelites. Samson kept given over to the Philistines, and as he did so, the Lord made the bonds which Samson had on his back become on fire, and he snapped them, grabbed hold of a jawbone of a donkey, and with that jawbone of a donkey he slew 1,000 men. The Spirit of the Lord, he was Jackie Chan, Jet Li, Bruce Willis, Claude Van Damme, all of them rolled into one. He just went berserk, and 1,000 deaths later he stood there like that. 1,000 bodies lying behind him and around him. Defeated the enemies. You see, God had intended from the very beginning of this man's life, I will use you to destroy my enemies. I am going to use you. And despite Samson's best efforts to go against God's wishes and to go against the will of God, Samson found himself having bankrupted the nation of the Philistines and also having slew 1,000 of its army. And Samson took a bit of pride in what he had just done. And he wrote a song about himself. Now, if I was to read it out, it doesn't sound very sing-songy. It sounds kind of weird and funny, but in the Hebrew it sounds poetic and nice, and you can get the drift of it. But he took great pride, even though it was the Lord that delivered them. It was the Lord that gave him this supernatural ability to be able to fight off these Philistines. And he sung his song, and he patted himself on the back, and the people of Israel that would have been standing observing this great scene. quite quickly wanted, okay, right, okay, we get the picture, you're the man, okay, we get it. And then the Lord did something to humble him. He made him very thirsty. Very thirsty. You see, Samson with his great strength, Samson with his reputation, had got too big for his boots. And there he thought, I am bigger than God. And God took something that was so simple, something which we all take for granted, especially in Scotland because we get far too much of it. Water. Water. And there he thirsted. There he thirsted, desiring water until he got to the point of death. And then he cried out to the Lord. He says, okay, you delivered me. I'm sorry. And the Lord opened up the ground and water sprang up. And he was revived. And then it says in the last verse, I'm going to skip that slide, forget that slide. Came to the last verse of chapter 15, and he judged Israel. Samson judged Israel in the days of the Philistines 20 years. After Samson's humbling, after he has realized that it's always been God's, he submitted to God, and for 20 years he ruled over the people of Israel. Peace and prosperity. Came to the land of Israel under the rule of Samson, and he looked after them. The Philistines were too busy trying to patch up their nation, trying to rub their sore wounds from what Samson had done to them. But we come to Judges chapter 16. 20 years have passed. Many believe now the situation which I've just narrated to you when he was in his early 20s. Many people believe now he was in his early 40s, mid 40s. And Samson becomes a failure. Becomes a failure. How does he become a failure? Well, we knew about his wife. We knew about him going down to the Philistines and trying to take a wife there, and how that ended badly. Well, what does he go and do? Chapter 16 verse 1. Samson went to Gaza, and there he saw a prostitute and went into her. And the Gazites were told, Samson has come here, and they surround the place. Obviously Samson was playing Cluedo or Scrabble or something like that. Let your imagination, don't let it run too wild with that. But he went down to Gaza, which is in where the Philistines were at that time. And he got hold of another woman. He got hold of another woman. This was his Achilles heel. Sex. This is what destroyed him. I have, over the past few weeks, and build up to this, I have listened and read up on the testimonies of so many people. And I have come to the conclusion that one of the greatest factors to how spiritually and how emotionally and how mentally bankrupt this nation is because of sex and the misuse of it. We live in a day and age where in a matter of 2 clicks or a couple of taps on the keyboard, you can have all manner of evil in front of you. Whether it be child abuse, whether it be just your normal sex, whatever it is, you can have it just in seconds. Most of us have phones which can do the same thing. And we have this tremendous ability to see such depraved images. I was reading in the newspaper this week about how there's some police officers in England who are right now sitting in a tribunal. Why? Because they were passing out extreme pornographic images. Men who are meant to be examples to us in our society, passing out extreme pornographic images. Samson had 20 years of peace. And like so many other nations, and I'm a great lover of history. I love reading about Alexander the Great and that great military genius that he was. I love reading about the Roman Empire, and I love reading about the British Empire and so on and so forth. But like it with Alexander the Great, the whole known world, he conquered it all. Conquered it all. Doesn't matter how big you were, he conquered you. He conquered you. And after he conquered the whole world, what did he do? He decided to build a city to remember him, called Alexandria. A beautiful city, a city which still exists to this very day in Egypt. And after he built his great city, and after he'd looked over his tremendous empire, he sat in his golden throne in the city of Alexandria and wept. And wept. Why? Because he had experienced it all. Some historians, some unreliable, some more reliable than others, claim that he had homosexual tendencies. And he, after having peace about him, he decided, I'm fed up with war. I can't get any more war. I can't build anything more beautiful than what I have. Let's explore. And he did. But he wept. The world that he had, the lusts of his flesh, he was it. Nothing was above him. He was it. He was the man. But he wept. Nothing else to experience. It was finished. And in his mid-30s he died. An incredible man, incredible talents. The Roman Empire, not built on one man alone, but on many men, with many great victories, many great armies. They conquered all that they could see. And when they get fed up with conquering, what did they do? They went back to Rome and they lusted after one another. And they committed all sorts of sexual acts, and they had all sorts of orgies, until what happened? The Goths, who were their spit as far as they were concerned, the Goths, who didn't have a patch on the Roman Empire, decided, you know what, we can take these guys. And then crumbled the Roman Empire. Samson had peace. Samson had peace. Like we are in today. We have a tremendous amount of peace. Our generations before us, our great-grandfathers, our grandfathers, or my great-great-grandfathers, went through World War I, went for World War II. Now we're experiencing this peace. And what does society do with itself and peace? It explores. It explores. Samson was a military man. Samson was a warrior. Samson was a man who wanted to get out there and get his hands dirty. Now the Lord had promised Samson, we will destroy the Philistines. We will do this. We will overthrow this nation. You'll just need to have patience. But no. Samson had had enough. He knew he couldn't get what he wanted in Israel. So he went down to the Philistines. And there he begun the slow decline to which would ultimately crush him literally. There's many young people in this place. I'm one of them. Pornography is by far the biggest enemy I will have to fight. I will have to fight. I have been alive for 23 years. I can more than comfortably say that I have at times been addicted to pornography, no doubt about it. And to this very day I will struggle with it. From the age of 12, the average boy will become addicted to pornography. Grandparents and parents in this room, don't think that your kids or your grandparents are trustworthy. Don't think. And the thing is, I haven't just read, I hate this. People that say, well, I'll give you Christian sources, I'll give you so many sources which are all biased and all this and all that rest of it. I went to the atheist community and I looked at what they had to say about pornography. And there's very few of them. In fact, I haven't found one. I haven't found one that had a good word to say about it. Not one. Every one of them were telling telling the dangers, telling the evils, telling the what could happen if you start to go down this road, if you do this. And they're all like, the great contradiction to my mind was, we've got to allow free speech, we've got to allow the people to make up their own minds, we've got to allow the content, the evil to be there, but we've just got to tell everybody it's wrong and it's bad and we don't touch it. I'm sorry, you tell me, if I was 13, 14 years old, don't touch that, it's bad, what am I going to do? I'm not going to just touch it and prod at it. I'm going to pick it up, play around with it and all the rest of it. Become addicted with it. And this is it. You can waste your life on looking at a screen. You can change your perception of the human beings around you by what you see in a screen. You can be so influenced subconsciously by what you see in a screen. You can't walk down the town centre, you can't watch the TV, you can't sit through a sitcom, you can't sit through a comedy show without being hit with some sort of sexual connotation, or even something worse, something explicitly sexual. Our nation is addicted to sex. Completely. It's a slave to it. Whether you like it, whether you don't, that's it. That's the fact of the matter. And what's worse, people that aren't, nations that aren't addicted to it, yeah, you're weirdos. What do you mean you've got controls over what your kids can see? What do you mean you've got controls over what kind of sexual content people can look at? What are you talking about? Somebody at the age of 17, 16, they should be allowed to make their own decisions and be able to say, oh yeah, I want to watch this extreme pornographic content and all the rest of it. But the damage is done. Look at our nation. We are totally corrupted. Our banks, greedy, totally corrupted. Our military, well, we haven't got a great record. We went over to Afghanistan, we went over to Iraq, and how many rapes, how many murders, how many evil acts have our army caused? And yet we sit and we think, how's this going to work? Well, I'll tell you what we're going to do. This is what we should do. We should educate our kids. From the age of 5 onwards, from whatever age we get, as soon as we get a hold of them, let's start educating them about the things of sex. Let's start educating them. Let the kid be a kid. Let the kid have his childhood. But no, that's not what they're interested in. And why won't the government, why won't the government kind of stand up and say too much about all this? Well, the fact is obvious, it's down to money. The Bible says it. It says the love of money is the root of all evil. The amount of money, we nearly earn £1 billion worth of tax from the porn industry in the UK alone. In the UK alone. The biggest industry in the whole world, without a shadow of a doubt, is the porn industry. Now I've looked into it, I've done my best to try and get the most unbiased view, to try and get the most biased view as well, to see what they all have to say. And women that have walked out of that porn industry, they have not a good thing to say about it. It's all evil. It's all, I was raped, I was abused, I was this, I was that. You get the odd one here and there that will come out and they will say, it wasn't all that bad. But by and large, without a doubt, the testimonies of so many of them is I have been emotionally destroyed. Emotionally destroyed. And we are look at these things and we think it's not that bad. I mean, I've been there myself. You know, Pastor, what's his name? I forget his name now. Pastor McKee came away with something which is so true. He says, you turn an insane thought into a sane thought to accommodate your purpose. And you would sit there at times and you would watch, I would sit there at times and I would watch these scenes and I would get my pleasure and I would think, you know, they're enjoying it. They're getting paid enough. They're all, and you would make excuses for it. And you'd say, oh, this makes sense. They're getting paid, they get what they want, I get what I want. Life's good. Doesn't work like that. Man's greedy. Love of money. These girls are abused. These girls are hurt. These girls are emotionally tarnished. Most of them never been able to have children ever because of the terrible pain and suffering that's put upon their bodies. And this breaks me to think of, I have been a part of this. And I have been a part of that. And my generation are just full of this. And are just full of that. And it tears me apart at times to think about these things. But that is the reality of it. You look at the scriptures, you see how beautiful a family life can be. You look at how beautiful things can be. But our world wants to destroy anything and everything that is beautiful. Anything and everything which God looks at and loves. And it will do its utmost to destroy everything that is beautiful. And Samson was here succumbed, as so many of us are, to sex. To sex. Read on. And he kept quiet all night, saying, "Let us wait till the light of the morning, and then we will kill him." But Samson lay till midnight. At midnight he arose. And he took hold of the doors of the gate of the city and the two posts, and pulled them up, bar and all, and put them on his shoulders, and carried them. You see, we get to a point where we think, oh, I've got it under control. I'm a good guy. I'm strong enough. I can handle it. I'm not addicted to it. I'm good enough. I'm strong enough to be able to do this by myself. And like Samson, you know, he's there. He's in a dangerous place. The Philistines have a desire to kill him. He knows this. He's not blind. He understands the situation. But he thinks, I'm strong enough. I can take them. I'd slay 1,000 of them. I'll do it again. Walks out of the house of the prostitute, grabs hold of the gate of the city and pulls it apart. Takes the top of the gate and everything with it. And there he drags it to the top of a hill. Nobody's going to mess with this guy. He's too strong. He's too powerful. He's it. Then we come to this. Samson the fickle. Samson the fickle. After this, he loved a woman whose name was Delilah. And the lords of the Philistines came up to her and said to her, "Seduce him and see where his great strength lies, and by what means we may overpower him." So Delilah said to Samson, "Please tell me where your great strength lies and how you might be bound that one could subdue you." I mean, is it just me, or does this seem so stupid? Is it just me, or from the outward appearance he's with this Philistine woman and she wants to know how to make him weak? She wants to know, how can I do this? How can I make you weak? How can I destroy you? How do you do it? And Samson, as we read, comes away with a few lies. Says, "If you bind me with 7 fresh bowstrings that have not been dried, then I'll be weak. I'll just be as others men. I'll just be as other men." So what does she do? She does it. Gets some strings, ties them, gets the bowstrings, ties them up, tells him the Philistines are coming. He jumps up, snaps everything. She looks at him and goes, "Oh, you lied to me." But surely from the outward appearance, surely Samson can see what's happening here. Surely you would think, don't you get this? Don't you get this? Samson is so blinded by the lust of his heart. He can't get it. He doesn't get it. He doesn't get it. Then he comes on to the next one after Delilah tells him how much of a liar he is and how much he doesn't love her because of this. He says, all right, okay. I'm sorry. Just get new ropes. Just get some new ropes. You get some new ropes and you bind me. I'm as weak as can be, and you won't be able to defeat me. And what does she do? She does exactly that. She takes him, binds him, tells him the Philistines are coming. He jumps up, snaps the ropes. Once again, she's in turmoil. She's like, oh, I thought you loved me. I thought this, I thought that. I mean, what is this we have if you're not going to be truthful to me? And after a while, he says, okay. Right, this is it. And this is interesting because he starts to get closer to the truth. He says, try to think what you call it now. The weave. Get the weave. Put the 7 locks of my hair. Put it into the web of the weave. Put the pin in. Strap it in. And there I will just be as weak as anything. I won't be able to do it. Just that's how you do it. She does so. She tells Samson, Philistines are coming up. He gets up, pulls the pin out, unlooses his hair from the web, jumps up. And she says in verse 15, how can you say I love you when your heart is not with me? You have mocked me these 3 times. You have not told me where your great strength lies. Verse 16 tells us that after that, for days, she pressed him hard. She vexed him to the point of death. And there's a few guys in here that will know that feeling. There he struggled with this. She pressed him and pressed on him and wanted so badly the secret of Samson's. But there was that small part of Samson's heart that wanted to be obedient to God. It didn't want to lose this. Didn't want to give up that final vow. But eventually, after being vexed to the point of death, he says, okay, this is how you do it. This is how you do it. Just cut the 7 locks of my hair, just cut them off. Cut them off completely. Take them out. And I will just be weak. Samson, the finished. When Delilah saw that he had told her all his heart, she sent and called the lords of the Philistines, saying, come up again, for he has told me all his heart. And she made him sleep on her knees, and she called a man and had him shave off the 7 locks of his head, and she began to torment him, and his strength left him. And she said, the Philistines are upon you. And he awoke from his sleep. I will go out as at other times and shake myself free. But he did not know the Lord had left him. The Philistines seized him and gouged out his eyes, brought him down to Gaza, and bound him with bronze shackles, and he ground at the mill in the prison. This is what can happen to us. We live, like I've already pushed and pressed on, we live in a day and age where it's just all about sex, where it's just all about trying to make us do things and trying to peer pressure us into things. The Lord says, don't. Be obedient. Hold yourselves, keep yourselves, look after yourselves, be pure in my sight. Why? Because I can use you then. I can use you. You won't be stuck grinding at the mill. You listen to so many people, young and old, and they're fed up with this grinding at the mill. They're finished, they're addicted, they're sold over to this world, and yet there they are grinding at the mill, just grinding, just waking up 9 o'clock, half 8, whatever it is, to get to work, to grind at the mill again. And this is it, they're just living this life of slavery to the sin, this life of chasing after one desire after another desire, and as soon as they seem to have got it, it disappears. The health that they once had is going and fading. The joy they had as parents is now grown up and gone out the house. The great desires they had of achievements in workplaces, the achievements they wanted to have in life in general, it's all come and gone. They've been at their seminaries, they've received the rewards, they've been there, they've done it, they've got them plaqued up on their wall, but they're still grinding at the mill. Nothing's really changed. Those that have got their degrees, they've got a few letters after their name or before their name, but that's it. They still need to get down and grind at the mill, addicted to their sin, to their slavery. Young person, God can use you, but be pure. Remain pure. Be pure. Is it as simple as what I've just said? No, it certainly is not. It is a tremendous struggle, and it will be so all your life to remain pure. To remain pure. To be in front of the Lord and walk holy in His eyes. It's just, I read the likes of Job. I read the likes of Moses. I'll read the likes of the apostles, and this great life of sacrifice, and it just seems a million miles away from what I can attain in my Christian life, because you just feel as if you're constantly battling against your desires and against the flesh. And I know these guys did that, but man, it's incredible. The world just grinds and grinds and grinds, and is at the mill, and is just continually grinding at the mill, day in, day out, 9 o'clock, 5 o'clock, whatever it is. They just grind, waiting, hoping that maybe one day they'll feel fulfilled. It doesn't happen like that. The only true fulfillment, the only true joy, is found in the Lord Jesus Christ. You know, you can watch what you want, you can sleep with what you want, you can achieve what you want, you can do whatever you want, you can drink whatever you want, but all these things will not even come close to scratching the surface of what you will find in the relationship with the Lord Jesus Christ. It's not a drop in the ocean of the love that He has for you and what He has done for you. And this is the great sadness about Samson. Chance after chance after chance. Chance after chance after chance. Thank God that the story doesn't end here, and that's not it, and it could easily have been. God still wanted to use this man. But do you realise how difficult He made this? How painful this was all was. God had this plan for him that meant he could keep his 2 eyes. God had this plan for him that didn't involve him becoming a slave to his enemies. God had this plan for him that didn't involve him having to suffer the betrayal of his dear wife. God had a plan for him that didn't involve him having to be the subject of scorn from his own nation. God had this tremendous plan for him. But such was the hardness of heart. Such was the fickleness. He just wanted to make it so hard for himself. You know, it's a wonderful thing to know that one day I'll be free from all this. Forever. Forever free. Free from the tremendous battles that you face daily. And I'll be able to rest. I'll be able to rest. But now I obey. Between now and when the Lord decides to take me, now is the time to obey. Now is the time to obey. You can be a Samson, and if the Lord does keep you, and you can scrape it in by the skin of your teeth, but let me tell you, this is the exception to the rule. Samson is not the norm. You don't find a Samson in every page of the Bible. He gets there in the end. He's a man of faith. But learn from him. Learn from the terrible pitfalls of his life. Learn from the temptations that he had. Learn from his failures. Learn from his stupidity, his idiocy. Learn that you can have something greater than Samson ever could dream of, because you're obedient to him. Obedient to the Lord. Obedient to the one who matters most, Christ Jesus, God. Amen.